On February 17, 2005, workmen responding to a routine maintenance call at a San Antonio apartment complex stumbled backward, choking on thick black smoke pouring from apartment windows. The acrid smell of burning plastic and fabric filled the air. One brave worker pushed through an unlocked door but retreated moments later, gasping desperately for air, his lungs burning from the toxic fumes. When firefighters finally cleared the smoke and the air became breathable again, they discovered 21-year-old Michael Andrade lying motionless on his bed, his right arm twisted unnaturally behind his back in a position that suggested his final moments had been filled with terror and pain. The pre-med student at St. Mary's University, who had spent countless nights studying to save lives, would never attend another class. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold. There was no forced entry anywhere in the apartment, no broken windows. The door had been unlocked from the inside. Whoever ended Michael's life had vanished like smoke in the wind, leaving behind a crime scene that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Detective Sarah Martinez walked through Michael's apartment, trying to piece together what had happened here. The scene was bizarre and deeply unsettling. 3 separate fires had been set, one in a wingback chair in the living room, another at the foot of Michael's bed, and a third mysteriously placed on the bedroom closet floor. This wasn't random destruction or vandalism. Someone had desperately tried to erase evidence. But what evidence? And why steal Michael's computer, video camera, and other electronics after setting fires that should have destroyed everything anyway? Michael's sister provided the only lead that seemed relevant. Her brother had mentioned someone suspicious hanging around the apartment complex, someone who made his skin crawl. Michael, who was usually an excellent judge of character, had sensed something deeply wrong about this person, but he'd never gotten the chance to tell his sister who it was. The investigation stalled almost immediately. Michael's family pleaded desperately for answers, calling the police daily, but the detectives had nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no suspects. The case was going cold fast. Then, 4 days after Michael's body was discovered, everything changed completely with a single, anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end of the line carried an unsettling, chilling confidence. The caller knew about the stolen laptop. He possessed details about the crime scene that had never been released to the public. Most shocking of all, he made an impossible claim. The person who ended Michael's life never used the front door. Think about that for a second. How do you get into a locked apartment without using the door? How do you eliminate someone, set 3 fires, steal electronics, and disappear without leaving a single trace at the entry point? The caller's final words before hanging up gave Detective Martinez the answer she needed. Check the attic. Detective Martinez stood in Michael's bedroom closet, staring up at the ceiling panel. The idea seemed absurd, like something from a movie thriller. But when she pushed the panel aside and shined her flashlight into the darkness above, her breath caught in her throat. The insulation had been disturbed. There was a clear pathway through the attic space, like someone had crawled through recently. And that pathway led directly to apartment 1002, right next door to Michael's unit. Maria Solis answered her door with the smile of someone who had absolutely nothing to hide. 23 years old, single mother, quiet tenant who kept to herself. When Detective Martinez asked if she knew Michael Andrade, Maria's face showed genuine confusion. Michael who? I don't know where that apartment even is. But Detective Martinez had been a cop long enough to trust her instincts over pretty smiles and innocent claims. Something about Maria's body language didn't match her words. Within hours, Martinez had a search warrant. Inside Maria's apartment, investigators made their first crucial discovery. Wrapped around the spool of Maria's vacuum cleaner, they found thread. Black polyester fibers wrapped around cotton, dyed with an unusual combination of colors. It was as distinctive as a fingerprint. The forensic team compared it to the ligature that had been used to strangle Michael Andrade. It was a perfect match. But it was the second discovery that made the case even more disturbing. In Maria's laundry hamper, they found a pair of men's jeans. Clinging to the denim were tiny glass fibers, footballs shaped from heat expansion. Fiberglass insulation that had survived fire. The exact same charred insulation that had been found on Michael's body. Maria's innocent facade finally crumbled under the weight of physical evidence. There was someone else living in her apartment. Someone she'd been hiding. His name was Joe Luna, 25 years old, fresh out of prison for carjacking and aggravated assault on a police officer. He was a violent offender with multiple warrants, and he'd been hiding in his girlfriend Maria's apartment, knowing that stepping outside meant going straight back to prison. But Luna wasn't just hiding from his past crimes. He was actively planning new ones. As detectives dug deeper into Luna's background, a terrifying pattern emerged. 5 home invasions in the San Antonio area, all unsolved, all with the same signature. Luna would break into homes, cut bed sheets into strips, and use them as ligatures to bind his victims while he robbed them. Families had been terrorized. Children had watched in horror as this predator threatened their parents, feeding off their fear like a drug's. And then Detective Martinez realized something that made her stomach turn. Michael Andrade wasn't Luna's first victim who had gone from robbery to something much worse. He was practice. Luna had been escalating, and Michael had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The attic above forensic analysis revealed exactly how Luna had committed what seemed like an impossible crime. Above Maria's apartment and Michael's apartment was a common attic space. A 60-foot crawl space filled with dust, darkness, and fiberglass insulation. Luna, bored and desperate for his next thrill, had discovered the attic access. He'd realized that he could crawl through the space and access other apartments in the complex. Think about how terrifying that is. You're sleeping in your own bed, your door is locked, you feel safe, and someone is literally crawling through the ceiling above you, waiting for the right moment to drop down. On the night of February 17, 2005, that's exactly what Luna did. He pushed aside the ceiling panel in Michael's bedroom closet and dropped down into the apartment like death from above. Michael woke up to find a stranger standing in his bedroom. He was wearing only boxer shorts and a t-shirt, completely defenseless, caught in that horrifying moment between sleep and waking where nothing makes sense. The struggle was brief but violent. Luna tore strips from Michael's bedsheets, his signature method. He bound Michael's hands behind his back with the makeshift ligatures. And then, as Michael begged for his life, Luna strangled him with methodical precision, feeling the life drain from the young pre-med student's body. But ending Michael's life was just the beginning of Luna's plan. Luna knew that if Michael's body was discovered too quickly, investigators would start asking questions. They'd search for evidence. They'd look for connections. He needed time, and fire would give him that time. He set the first fire in the bedroom closet, right where he dropped down from the attic. Then he climbed back up through the ceiling panel and returned to Maria's apartment, 60 feet away through the dusty darkness. But when he got back to Maria's apartment and looked outside, he realized something was wrong. No fire trucks, no alarm. The fire he'd set wasn't big enough or fast enough. The smoke wasn't spreading like he'd hoped. Paranoia consumed him. He made a fatal decision. He went back. Luna crawled through the attic a second time, dropped back down into Michael's apartment through the same ceiling panel. And this time he took Michael's computer, video camera, and car keys. Evidence that might connect them. Then he set 2 more fires, one in the wingback chair and another at the foot of Michael's bed, surrounding the body with flames. He climbed back up through the ceiling for the final time, satisfied that he'd covered his tracks. But Luna made a crucial mistake. After crawling through that insulation-filled attic twice in one night, his clothes were covered in fiberglass particles. And when he got back to Maria's apartment, he used her vacuum cleaner to clean himself off. That vacuum cleaner would become the star witness in his conviction. With the physical evidence mounting and Maria's testimony placing him at the scene, Luna's story began to fall apart. Maria, faced with potential charges herself, broke under interrogation. She admitted she'd known about the outstanding warrants. She admitted she'd known about Luna's violent capabilities. And most damning of all, she admitted that Luna had confessed to her about Michael Andrade. Luna had enjoyed it, she said. He lived for the adrenaline rush, the absolute power he felt when his victims realized they were going to die. Confronted with the forensic evidence, the thread from the ligature, the fiberglass insulation, the attic pathway, Maria's testimony, Luna finally admitted his guilt. But his confession proved even more terrifying than his denial had been. He described the fear in his victim's eyes with the casual detachment of someone discussing weather. He spoke with particular satisfaction about that college kid. Michael had known he was going to die, Luna said. And that fear, that absolute terror in Michael's eyes as he gasped for breath, had been intoxicating. During his confession, Luna also admitted to dozens of other crimes, home invasions and robberies that police hadn't even connected to him yet. He bragged about his techniques, his ability to terrorize families, his enjoyment of watching children cry while he threatened their parents. The detectives listening to the confession felt physically sick. This wasn't just a criminal confessing to his crimes. This was a predator reveling in his victim's suffering. When Joe Luna's capital-ending life trial began in March 2006, the prosecution had an overwhelming case. The forensic evidence alone was damning. The vacuum cleaner thread matching the ligature, the fiberglass insulation connecting Luna to the attic crawl, Maria's testimony, Luna's own confession, and the stolen electronics found in Maria's apartment. But then, something unprecedented happened. Right at the beginning of the trial, in front of the jury, Joe Luna pleaded guilty to capital-ending life. Think about that. He didn't wait for the prosecution to present their case. He didn't let his defense attorneys try to create reasonable doubt. He just stood up and admitted, in open court, that he had ended Michael Andrade's life during a burglary. His guilty plea left the jury with only one decision to make: punishment. Life in prison or the death penalty. During the punishment phase, victims from Luna's previous home invasions took the stand. They described the terror of waking up to find a masked man in their bedroom. Parents spoke through tears about watching their children tremble in fear as Luna threatened them. The psychological damage he'd inflicted on these families was profound and lasting. And then Luna himself took the stand. In another shocking move, he looked directly at the jury and asked them to sentence him to death. He didn't want life in prison. He didn't want the possibility of parole. He didn't want redemption or a second chance. "I'm asking you to give me the death penalty," Luna told the jury calmly. "I don't deserve to live." The courtroom fell silent. Prosecutors and defense attorneys alike were stunned. In the history of capital trials, it's extraordinarily rare for a defendant to actively request their own execution. Luna explained that he'd rather become a cautionary tale than spend decades in prison. He wanted people to remember him as an example of what happens when someone forfeits their right to exist in civilized society. There was no remorse in his voice, no acknowledgement of the lives he'd shattered, just cold, calculated acceptance of his own fate. The jury didn't need much time to deliberate. After hearing Luna's own testimony, after listening to his victims describe their ongoing trauma, after understanding the escalating pattern of violence that had culminated in Michael Andrade's ending, they granted Luna's request. The verdict was unanimous: death penalty. When the sentence was read, Michael's mother collapsed into her husband's arms. After more than a year of grief and uncertainty, they'd finally heard the words they'd been waiting for. Justice had been served, even though the price, their son's bright future, could never be repaid. Luna showed no emotion as the verdict was announced. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the devastation he'd caused. He simply nodded, as if confirming a dinner reservation rather than accepting his own death sentence. Outside the courthouse, Detective Sarah Martinez faced a crowd of reporters. She held up a small evidence bag containing the distinctive glass fibers that had sealed Luna's fate. Joe Luna believed he'd committed the perfect crime, Martinez said. The attic entry, the fires to destroy evidence, living right next door where no one would think to look. He thought he was untouchable. She paused, looking at the evidence bag. But there's no such thing as a perfect crime. You can plan every detail, manipulate every circumstance, calculate every angle, but you'll always leave something behind. In Luna's case, he left his entire story in a vacuum cleaner. The case sent shockwaves through the forensic science community. The fiberglass insulation particles, transformed by heat into distinctive football shapes, had become more identifiable than untouched insulation. In his desperation to cover his tracks, Luna had unknowingly created a forensic signature more unique than any fingerprint. The 5 families Luna had terrorized in previous home invasions finally received closure. Children who had cowered in fear while this monster threatened their parents could now sleep peacefully. Parents who had lived in constant terror, checking locks obsessively and jumping at every sound, could finally begin to heal. Michael's medical textbooks still lined his bookshelf, dog-eared pages marking his progress through anatomy and physiology. His acceptance letter to medical school remained pinned to his bulletin board, a future that would never unfold. But his ending had accomplished something profound. It had stopped a predator whose violence was clearly escalating. Who knows how many future victims were saved? Because the evidence Luna tried to destroy ended up convicting him. Joe Luna remains on death row in Texas, housed at the Polunsky unit in Livingston, where the state keeps its condemned inmates. His Texas Department of Criminal Justice identification number is 9099509, assigned when he was received into the system on April 25, 2006, the same day he was formally sentenced. Nearly 20 years have passed since Luna was sent to death row, and he remains there today in 2025. Despite his request for execution and his desire to die rather than spend life in prison, the wheels of justice move slowly in capital punishment cases, even when the defendant asks for death. Luna has filed multiple appeals over the years, despite initially requesting the death penalty. In 2012, 6 years after his conviction, Luna sought a new punishment hearing. His appellate attorneys argued that his trial lawyers hadn't adequately presented mitigating evidence during the sentencing phase. During that 2012 hearing, Luna's mother, Josie Luna, testified that her son had experienced a chaotic childhood filled with drug use and criminal activity by relatives. A psychologist, Dr. Jack Farrell, testified that Luna had been a lost boy who suffered from mental health issues and had slipped through the cracks at school. They argued that if the jury had heard this evidence, they might have chosen life in prison instead of death. But there was a problem with this argument. Luna himself had asked for death. He'd told the jury he didn't deserve to live. He'd confessed to dozens of crimes beyond Michael Andrade's ending, bragging about terrorizing families. The appeals court ultimately rejected his request for a new hearing. In 2008, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld Luna's conviction and death sentence, rejecting all 25 points of error his attorneys had raised. The court found that Luna's guilty plea was knowing and voluntary, that the evidence against him was overwhelming, and that his death sentence was appropriate given the circumstances of the crime and his criminal history. Luna's case made it all the way to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2019. His attorneys argued that his trial counsel had been ineffective and that he should receive a new punishment hearing. The Federal Appeals Court rejected these arguments as well, finding that Luna's trial attorneys had performed adequately under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, namely, a client who openly admitted his guilt and asked to be executed. As of October 2025, Joe Luna has been on death row for over 19 years. He is now approximately 45 years old. Texas currently has over 180 inmates on death row, and Luna is among them, waiting in a single-cell housing unit with limited contact with other inmates. Texas leads the nation in executions, but even there, the average time between sentencing and execution has stretched to over 11 years due to the lengthy appeals process. Luna's case is complicated by the fact that while he initially requested death, his subsequent appeals have challenged various aspects of his trial and sentencing. No execution date has been set for Joe Luna. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice website lists him as an active death row inmate, with his crime dated February 17, 2005, and his arrival on death row as April 25, 2006. His occupation before imprisonment was listed as laborer, and his prior prison record shows he served time for assault on a public servant with bodily injury and burglary of a habitation by force. The families of Luna's victims, including Michael Andrade's family, have waited nearly 2 decades for the sentence to be carried out. The lengthy appeals process, while designed to ensure justice and prevent wrongful executions, can feel like an additional torture for victims' families who were promised closure. Meanwhile, Michael's family has had to live with the loss of their son, brother, and friend for almost 20 years. Michael would be 41 years old today. He might have been a practicing physician, saving lives and fulfilling the dream he worked so hard to achieve. Instead, his life was cut short by a predator who dropped through his ceiling in the middle of the night. The final truth. The Michael Andrade case represents one of the most unusual crime scenes in forensic history. A perpetrator who literally dropped from above, who set multiple fires to destroy evidence, who lived right next door to his victim. It seemed like the perfect crime. But Joe Luna made a fatal mistake that night. In his panic to clean up the evidence, he used Maria Solis's vacuum cleaner to remove the fiberglass insulation from his clothes. That vacuum cleaner preserved the thread from Michael's torn bed sheets, thread that was wrapped around the spool like a confession. The fiberglass particles told their own story. When fiberglass insulation is exposed to fire, the glass fibers expand into distinctive football shapes. These heat-altered fibers are more unique and identifiable than untouched insulation. Luna had tried to destroy the evidence with fire, but instead, he'd made it more distinctive, more damning. Think about the irony of that. Every action Luna took to cover his tracks ended up providing more evidence against him. The fires made the insulation more identifiable. The vacuum cleaner preserved the ligature thread. His return trip through the attic to steal electronics connected him even more firmly to the crime scene. But beyond the forensic evidence, this case reveals something darker about human nature. Luna didn't just end Michael's life during a burglary gone wrong. He enjoyed it. He sought out that thrill repeatedly, terrorizing families in home invasions, feeding off their fear and helplessness. The anonymous phone call that broke the case open remains a mystery to this day. Who called the police and told them to check the attic? Was it someone in the apartment complex who had heard rumors? Was it Maria Solis herself, unable to live with what she knew? Or was it someone else who had witnessed Luna's suspicious behavior? We may never know the identity of that caller, but their tip saved the case from going cold. Without that call, detectives might never have thought to look up, never discovered the attic pathway, never connected Luna to Michael's ending. The case also highlights the importance of forensic science in modern criminal investigations. The threat analysis, the fiberglass particle examination, the comparison of materials. All of these techniques turned seemingly random fibers and particles into damning evidence. Detective Martinez's instincts played a crucial role too. She didn't just accept Maria Solis's claims of ignorance. She trusted her gut feeling that something was wrong, pushed for a search warrant, and found the evidence that cracked the case wide open. For Michael Andrade's family, the conviction brought a measure of justice, but could never bring back what they'd lost. Michael had been weeks away from finishing his undergraduate degree at St. Mary's University. He'd already been accepted to medical school. His dream of becoming a doctor, of saving lives and helping people, was about to become reality. Instead, he became a victim of random violence, ended by a predator who saw him as nothing more than a source of thrills and stolen electronics. Michael's textbooks still carry his handwritten notes. His acceptance letter remains a symbol of a future that never happened. His family still grieves the loss of his potential, the children he'll never have, the lives he'll never save as a physician. The 5 families Luna terrorized in previous home invasions also found some measure of closure. Their nightmare was over. The man who had invaded their homes, tied them up, threatened their children, and stolen their sense of safety was finally caught and convicted. They could stop jumping at every sound, stop obsessively checking locks, stop having nightmares about a masked intruder appearing in their bedrooms. Luna's escalating pattern of violence was clear. He'd started with robberies, moved to home invasions with bound victims, and finally graduated to taking a life. If he hadn't been caught when he was, there's no telling how many more people would have suffered at his hands. The attic pathway that Luna thought made him invincible became his downfall. The fires meant to destroy evidence created more distinctive evidence. The vacuum cleaner he used to clean up became a time capsule of his crime. Every clever move he made turned out to be another nail in his coffin. Sometimes the methods criminals use to avoid justice become the very things that ensure it. Sometimes the evidence you try hardest to destroy becomes the evidence that convicts you. And sometimes, the perfect crime is only perfect until forensic science proves otherwise. As of today, Joe Luna sits in a single cell on Texas death row, waiting for an execution that may or may not ever come. The man who asked to die, who told the jury he didn't deserve to live, has now spent nearly 2 decades fighting that very sentence through appeals. The irony isn't lost on anyone familiar with the case. Luna wanted to become a cautionary tale, a warning to others. In that sense, he got his wish. His case is studied in forensic science courses. His crimes are discussed in criminal justice classes. His name is associated with one of the most unusual crime scenes in modern history. But he's not remembered the way he wanted to be remembered. He's not seen as some criminal mastermind whose perfect plan almost succeeded. He's remembered as a predator who made stupid mistakes, who left a trail of evidence in a vacuum cleaner, who thought he was smarter than forensic science and learned the hard way that he wasn't. Michael Andrade, on the other hand, is remembered for his potential, his dreams, his dedication to becoming a doctor. His family ensures his memory lives on. Scholarship funds have been created in his name. His story serves as a reminder that violent crime doesn't just take a life. It steals futures, destroys families, and leaves wounds that never fully heal. The lesson of this case is clear. There are no perfect crimes. You can plan every detail. You can try to destroy evidence with fire. You can crawl through attics and disappear like smoke. But you'll always leave something behind. Science doesn't lie, evidence doesn't forget, and justice, no matter how long it takes, finds a way. Joe Luna dropped from above like death itself, thinking he was untouchable. But in the end, the evidence he tried to erase became the evidence that convicted him. The fires he set to cover his tracks created forensic signatures that sealed his fate. And the vacuum cleaner he used to clean up his mess preserved his crime for all time. That's the real story of the Michael Andrade case. Not a tale of a criminal genius who almost got away with it, but a story of forensic science, determined investigators, and the inevitable truth that no matter how clever you think you are, evidence always tells the story, and sometimes that story leads straight to death row.